Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. The sun is shining, and we are talking to Jack Browne today. Jack, you have a farm walk coming up, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first of all, just tell people a bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks for having me on. And I'd like to commend you and the team for lots of good content recently. It's a great podcast, and I only pick and choose a few bits here and there, but yeah, it's always interesting stuff. So I'm not quite sure why you're talking to me, but
Well, you have us buttered up at this stage, so I suppose it'll be easy questions from now on in. But we're talking to you for a reason, so go on, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I am an organic tillage farmer. This is my first year full simple organic, so just gone through the conversion process. Have about 100 acres, depending whether or not you count trees as agricultural land, which we might get into in a little bit as well. Fully tillage-based system, doing minimum tillage. So came out of a conventional share farming agreement a few years ago and converted to organic, put half of it into a multi-species sward and half of it then I've been cropping with combi crop in the first year. And then this year is my first year of full simple crop, and yeah, I have about 30 acres of oats in for Glanbia at the moment, and attempting to grow some milling wheat for Oak Forest Mills on the rest of it.
And why did you want to go organic?
So I guess growing up we were a lowish output system. Mixed farming enterprise, and had cattle, sheep and tillage. Then when the farm was in a share farming arrangement, I sort of appreciated the tillage side of it and having an off-farm income. I didn't really see myself going down the stock route, but that might change in the future. So then I was looking at sort of the conventional tillage model and the inputs involved and the size of machinery involved, and thinking about how I could actually make that pay for myself, or how I was ever going to have a chance of competing with the big boys, so to speak. So I sort of had in my mind that the only thing I could do would maybe chase a premium market. And while there's lots of ways to chase a premium market, most of them involve direct selling. So I thought, if I could sort of piggyback on an established premium market like the organic, I could reduce my inputs, reduce my yields, or reduce the size of machinery I needed, and produce food crops rather than feed crops, and yeah, have a go at farming myself. As a young farmer, it was always in my head that I didn't want to leave it rented out for my entire life, but still quite conscious of the fact that it's a little bit easier to make some money in a 9-to-5 than it is farming.
A little bit, but I mean, like it's interesting you talk about direct selling, because for people who might not know, I mean, a 100-acre tillage farm is not a big tillage farm by tillage farm standards. I mean, I talk to tillage farmers who have maybe 300 acres, and they think that's on the small side. So when you talk about value add, you talked about Glanbia there and oats, but are you looking at any other crops? Like, I know one organic tillage farmer, and he's looking at lentils for the human food market.
Yeah, I mean, that should ultimately, that would be my goal. I suppose I probably should have said it's tier long now as well, isn't it? But yeah, like that's I would like to pursue those sort of smaller processors and more bespoke crops. As I said, this is my first year full simple, and happy enough to try the milling wheat for Oak Forest, but I'm also sort of maybe at the lower end of my fertility cycle. So the multi-species sward there is full of clover. I was getting a few strange looks last week when I was putting topping skids on to try and go and cut my haylage, trying to keep that sort of cut level up at around 10 centimeters. But it's shown to be worth it now that the clover has just bounced back really quickly.
So explain that. Explain that to me, and explain that to other people, because I'm not, I'm not a tillage farmer. We have beef and we have dairy, but explain that to people. Why are you doing that?
So yeah, I split the farm in half thereabouts, and so I was cropping half of it for the last couple of years, but half of it was planted with a multi-species sward, and the idea there is just to build organic matter, but also to fix some nitrogen. So there's a lot of legumes and a variety of legumes, and then there's chicory and plantain and a few other herbs thrown in there just to try and increase biodiversity. And so last year it was all just topped, and then it was grazed by sheep over the winter, and then this is my first crop of haylage coming off of it. But rather than skin it down to the ground and get as much haylage as I could off of it, I was conscious that I wanted to make sure that the legumes were going to bounce back as quickly as possible and fix as much nitrogen as possible, so that when next year or the year after I decide to plough that in, or maybe in till or plough, I haven't decided yet, but yeah, there'll be as much fertility in that ground as possible. And trying to see what I can do without animal inputs, not for any great need or necessity, but just the idea of fixing as much nitrogen with legumes as possible, but also mining as much phosphates and stuff from deeper down with tap roots. So yeah, that's sort of where my head is at the moment, because even not having animals, you're sort of relying then on importing slurries and dung, which is just more time and more inputs. So if I could produce a high value or premium output crop without having to have any sort of inputs, or not no inputs, but reduce it and sort of treat it as a black box, that having the least amount of stuff coming onto the farm and having the highest value stuff leaving the farm.
It's funny, I've been talking to a lot of a lot of companies that sell seeds, and some feedback that I've got is that, you know, organic farmers, they just tend to stick to growing organic oats, and that's about it, and they're not very good on their soil cycles. But in contrast to that, you sound like very well informed. Do you think that's like the education you got, the conventional education that you got in it, or do you just think it's a natural interest?
It's definitely more of a natural interest. I'd say I've received some good education. I did engineering in UCD and then did my green cert in Kildalton, but it was quite conventional, and like they are trying to stick to a curriculum, and they can't be expected to sort of go and teach a lot of this stuff, which is a little bit left field, a little bit fringe in agricultural circles. And I mean, at that stage of my life, I wasn't going to be doing a whole lot of extracurricular reading. But yeah, it's more in recent years, sort of picking up a few books on regenerative ag, or whatever you want to call it, and that idea of looking after the soil a bit more, and lots of YouTube content as well. That definitely sort of sparked an interest and made me think of it as a whole biological system. And my undergrad was biological systems engineering, but it was more related to processing food and stuff like that. But that definitely did give me an appreciation for biology and sort of engineering biology to do what we want as a society. And then when I sort of started seeing these people making interesting developments with soil science, it definitely helped me to maybe understand the concepts a little bit more quickly. But in the most part, and I think most of the people that you interview on this podcast, and a lot of people who are maybe setting the way, like it's not a conventional formal education. It's people who have actually just gone out and either seen it on YouTube or read a few books, or seen it from their peers, and they're just trying it. And that seems to be.
Is there anything, like, 'cause you talk a lot about soil, and we have been talking a lot about soil, but is there anything in particular, say, about, I guess, soil nutrition or the content of soil that really surprised you? Like, I remember, you know, we're always taught, or we have this understanding that earthworms are important for soil, but it kind of blew my mind when I understood how important earthworms were, in terms of that they can release, you know, phosphorus in the soil that's locked in the soil. Or, you know, say, even, you know, with this huge emphasis being put on lime at the minute, and what lime can do for the soil. I mean, that's kind of standard now, but was there anything, you know, from your reading or watching that you just thought, oh wow, that's amazing, and then you could apply back to your own farm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex system, and like there's a whole lot of things to it, and there's books and books on different aspects to it. But a few things that did stick out. One was like the idea of the microbiome, and we were sort of talking about the food we eat, or the bugs that eat the food that we eat, and how that's what gives us our energy. And then when you think about the layer of soil around the plant roots being the plant's microbiome, and the exudates and the carbon sort of being traded for nutrients within this bacteria and different microorganisms, and then like movement of water through pores, and so like a sterile media with nothing in it. Yes, it can grow good crops, but I think with thinking about climate resistance or resilience, having a more complex system with more things interacting with each other and building that soil carbon is hugely important. And even this year there was we did soil samples, and like one field which was permanent pasture, and it's actually conventional, it's not in the organic farm, and it's for grazing, but I'd never remember it being plowed anyway, and that like a 16% organic matter, whereas my tillage farm had 6%. I think like there is that sort of 10 to 11% is where you start to see the benefits. So to me, that was like confirmation that yes, min-till or trying to get more carbon into the soil is the right way to go, because I mean 6% of anything isn't a whole lot.
Yeah. And I remember talking to a few farmers, and you touched upon min-till before we started this as well. But I remember there's this debate about ploughing and to plough or not to plough. But I was talking to someone, and they're saying, look, it's more nuanced than that, because you can set the plough at certain depths if you are going to plough. But do you think there's an argument for that, or are you going to try min-till first and see how it works for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me a year ago, I would have said min-till all the way, and now I've been into it for a couple of years, and I can see the weeds and the grass weeds sort of taking hold.
But are they weeds or are they flowers of another name? I mean,
yes, I know, but it's they can be a little bit hard to look at. And look, if I had seed cleaning set up here, which I'd hoped in a few years, but just haven't got around to investing in that. There's a long list of investments I'd like to do, but if I was confident I could produce a high quality crop that wasn't going to heat, or that wasn't going to have any contaminants in it, whether that's weed seeds or green material or whatever, then I wouldn't mind them as much. But yeah, the grass weeds are going to affect yield a little bit, which I don't necessarily mind. But yeah, I think there is something to be said for just turning over that grass or the lay or whatever it is your fertility building stage is, and getting a little bit of a head start against it. So yeah, when this multi-species forward, when I do eventually sort of go into an arable cycle after that, I'll play around with it. I might try some of it in min-till, but I imagine I'd like to try some of it with shallow plough as well. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to ruin all the good work. I don't want to go down really deep, but I think it's just turning over that grass to give whatever else I'm putting in after it a bit of a head start. But then, like you see, I go out with a shovel now and again and dig down in the chicory roots or whatever, the plantain even, and some of the grasses, like they are getting down really deep. So there is definitely benefits happening in the soil. So I don't want to turn all of that upside down. But yeah, I'm not going to say live on air that I'll never use a plow again and be called a liar.
Well, look, it's obviously there's a bit of a quid pro quo there as well, in terms of, yes, you want to be restoring soil carbon, but you do actually need to grow things. And like you said, sometimes you need a bit of a head start, especially in organic, when you can't use pesticides or weed killers. You need a bit of a hand otherwise. But besides the debate around to till or not to till, there's a debate around trees as well. And you mentioned earlier when you were talking about your 100 acres, depending on if you counted trees as as farmland, or how you counted trees. And you're doing some work specifically around that, aren't you?
Yeah, so there's maybe the more conventional approach is my 7 acres of native woodland down in the bottom corner, where when we were ploughing here, that was sort of one of the water courses leaving the farm would get quite silty, so decided that would be a good place, and it was a bit rocky as well. So I went the department route and put in a native woodland there, which has been a great success. I love walking through it and watching the trees establish and take hold. Then the other side of it is the agro-forestry, or the silvo-arable system, which I developed with assistance from Imogen Rabone from Trees on the Land and her EIP project, which was to demonstrate silvo-arable systems in an Irish context. So silvo-arable is just any trees in an arable system. So I have kind of the intense side of the farm, which is closer to the house, and it's more fruit and nut crops. So there's rows that are 3 meters wide, and then the alleys in the middle are 24 meters. And there's apples, pears, plums, peaches, cherries, quince, medlar, all sort of dispersed in different varieties as well. And then down the other end, there's hazels, some walnut, sweet chestnut, and then in between those, there's sort of biomass trees like alder and autumn olive, which are nitrogen fixes as well. So yeah, I just got some European funding to plant those, and yeah, just this year you can see a few apples and stuff appearing on it. So looking forward to seeing how that develops over the next few years.
And you're doing some work in UL as well. You're doing some studies there.
Yeah, so the EIP finished up this year, and I guess I was looking for something else to fill a bit of time with, because planting trees is great. It gets you out in the mornings and evenings before and after work, during winter as well. The UL stuff mightn't be as physically active, might be a bit more time in front of a screen, but yeah, there's an interesting program down there, professional doctorate in engineering, where you can study part-time and even as an apprentice then with reduced fees. So I was able to go down there and sit a qualifier module. It starts in December each year, and you spend a few months developing a proposal and presenting that to a board, and if they like your idea, it goes forward, and you get nominated to join the professional doctorate of engineering program. So that's what I'm doing this week, actually, is I'm down there on first week of summer school. It's a distance learning program, so down there for 1 week, and then the rest of it's online. And yeah, so my topic is around bio-based fertilizers, or sort of waste derived fertilizers. My day job is working as a water and wastewater engineer, and this project will try and look at novel technologies to recover nutrients. So in Ringsend at the moment, there's a struvite plant being built, which is a mixture of magnesium, ammonia, and phosphate, which comes out of wastewater and forms a granule that can be put into a fertilizer spreader. And there's more of those technologies being developed either at lab scale or pilot scale. And while struvite is quite developed, there's a lot of these that aren't. So my research will try and look at which of these are maybe the most suitable for Irish farms and for Irish industrial wastewater treatment plants, to try and close that nutrient loop.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating, and probably even more important, especially as we get drier summers, and I guess climate change in other countries as well is important. But Jack, thank you so much for talking to us, and for everyone that's listening as well. Just remember that Jack has a farm walk coming up. What date exactly is the farm walk, Jack?
1st of July, I believe, it's Saturday. Yeah.
Well, I hope you know. I hope it's the 1st of July. And what time and whereabouts do people go to actually see you and hear you?
Yeah, Saturday is the 1st of July. In terms of time, I think it's around the lunchtime. I'm based in Total, County Carlow, and yeah, I think there's probably registration on the IOA website. And yeah, happy to discuss anything and show everyone my weeds.
They're just flowers. So you just have to tell people you're just very open-minded about weeds. But for everyone listening, thank you very much, and do go to the IOA website and do go to Jack's Walk and check it out and make sure you register for it. But you've been listening to Organic Matters podcast, brought to you by the Irish Organic Association, and I'm Hannah Mulligan. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to find out more about organics and sign up to Jack's Walk, the website is www.irishorganicassociation.ie.